All right, we are back with part two. You know what I'm saying? So let's stand here and keep letting Peter Zeihan tell us about what's going on in China and India and the entire relationship over here. Let's rock and roll.
And so they are closing ranks, demonizing outsiders, and hunkering down for an economic breakdown. Choose your measure. Demographics, trade, military reach, geographic exposure, finance, energy. The dragon is not only a myth, it's a dying one. And what does this all mean for the elephant? Opportunity. Now that doesn't mean there aren't challenges ahead, and one of them is going to hit now. There are 3 new strains of coronavirus that matter. The first one out of the United Kingdom is more communicable. It is probably already the dominant strain in both India and the United States. The second one out of South Africa is cross-species transmissible with rodents.
You need the food bunker. You have a busy life,
which means it will never go away. We now know for certain that we will all need boosters forever. The third one, the Brazilian variant, bypasses pre-existing naturally gained immunity. Now, luckily, all the vaccines that we know of so far in the West work against all of the variants, and all of the Western vaccine manufacturers are already working on phase 3 studies for boosters, which will all be ready by this October. So for the Americans, this is a relatively minor issue. But every American who gets a booster shot is someone else in the rest of the world who can't get a core shot. So this is something that is now the new normal. Even worse, for any country who pursued a herd immunity strategy, whether on purpose or accidentally, that includes Sweden and Brazil and India, you now need to do it all over again until you can achieve mass vaccination complete with a booster schedule. Which brings us to the fourth and final takeaway. Globally, we aren't even halfway through with coronavirus. Okay, that's a lot to absorb. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that there are a few questions that people want to throw my general direction.
Peter, fantastic. I think I will throw some of those questions. I'm sure all of them want to know this. 2 or 3 very important points. Why would the US leave? Why would it dismantle an infrastructure? Yeah, I mean, you had a reason to put it up, 40 years back, 50.
Okay, I'm like, yo, Peter Zeihan's not going to give the correct answer to this, so I will. It's very simple. Americans are now fully aware of what globalization has done to our civilization, right? They are completely aware of what happens when you continue to allow jobs to be exported overseas. And they are fully aware that places like Detroit and Chicago are completely and utterly fucking the responsibility of this global fucking order as a whole. And we're done with it. That's why Americans are fucking done with this goddamn bullshit as a whole. We cannot tolerate it anymore. That's the reason why it is. We're closing down this system. Because we don't care about the rest of the world. We're worried about us, and we are fucking struggling over here in this neck of the woods right now.
50 years back, up to 30 years back, you said. But now that it's in place, it's an infrastructure, it's an asset that you've got. Why would you leave?
Well, let me start with the logical and the scientific and the economic. I agree. I don't think the U.S. should leave. I think that the United States needs to retool the global order for the new age. I personally would love to see the United States lead a new alliance that is committed to human rights and laissez-faire capitalism and a general, being nice to each other sort of feel. But people who feel the way I did have lost the last 8 presidential elections. And in this most recent one, we didn't even have a candidate in the race. The globalist view in the United States is functionally gone. And the competition politically in my country is between a number of sides, all of whom think that the United States is either overextended or is there for the wrong reason, or that it can't be done in the first place. President Obama chose to just retreat from everything. President Trump chose to take a sledgehammer to whatever was left. And President Biden's not America First. President Biden's Buy America program is actually the most nationalist economic policy that my country has had since the Great Depression.
That's important to understand, right? I brought this up the other day, and how do I put this? This is important to understand that, like, Biden isn't that far from Trump. He's really not, as far as shit's concerned. I thought it was going to be a different way. I legitimately did. You know what I mean? But as long as he's doing what he's doing, I got absolutely no issue with what Biden's doing right now. Like, real shit. I know we don't like him just as an in general thing, but like, keeping it all the way a buck with you, I wanted, you know what I mean? This is kind of what I want. I wanted a more nationalist policy because I fucking hate globalism. You know what I mean? Let's keep rocking though.
We're done. We're out.
Yeah, I hear you. That is a political requirement, and surely that will be weighing on people's minds when they sort of plan for their elections. I'm only saying that since there is an infrastructure which is already in place.
I'm just saying, like, look, why can't we just keep getting free shit, right? Why can't we give more free shit? We need more free shit from you Americans. Like, you Americans are already doing it. Why not continue to do it? I don't understand, right? Because fuck you, that's why. All right, because we're sick of fucking standing here every time we call customer service talking to one of y'all. That's why. Legitimate. You're the fucking reason why. In the end of the day. Right? Like, you're legit. You know, like, just part of life, man. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, every time, you know, we have, like, some engineering job come open, y'all motherfuckers bid it out at, like, $12 a goddamn hour. Like, that's why. All right? Because we're fucking sick of this shit, and we're tired of not making any fucking money. It's that simple. In the end of the day.
I mean, why would they just give it up? Or would they probably contract it to people, you know, as partners?
Well, the whole idea of the global order is we pay people to Europe.
Just one more thing is, what about the defense industry? I mean, will they allow this backtracking?
The American defense industry doesn't have nearly the political clout that a lot of people think it does. And honestly, the United States is perfectly capable of turning isolationist and maintaining the defense industry in its current form. When you decide to back away from the world and you reduce all those bases, you need longer reach military capability. That doesn't come cheap. And that is something that both Democrats and Republicans in the United States agree is worth the investment. So you can stand back and have standoff distance and still not be involved in the day-to-day of what's going on in the Eastern Hemisphere.
Will the defense industry allow this? Yo, fuck the military-industrial complex. End of the day, like, yo, fuck y'all motherfuckers. All right, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it for all of us down here in the bottom who continue to pay these taxes to pay your fuckers out. Yo, fuck y'all motherfuckers. Sick of this fucking bullshit.
As to the sunk costs, when you have an economy the size of the United States and you never invested your economy in the physical infrastructure that is necessary to maintain the global system, then there's no economic loss when you back away from it. And that's exactly what we're doing. So yes, diplomatically, strategically, it seems like a waste of effort. I agree, but most Americans don't. And it's very easy for the United States to cut its defense ties and still maintain de facto control over the entire Western Hemisphere. And remember, the United States has 11 aircraft carrier battle groups and the rest of the world have none. So the United States retains the capacity to inject itself into any situation anywhere in the Eastern Hemisphere and then sail away from the next day. So that is involvement, but it's not involvement with the goal of stability. It's involvement with the goal of instability.
Yeah, but with an understanding then that there will be regional hegemons who will come in, and they could be sort of disruptive to the American order also.
Yes, that will happen, but that will take time, Right now, all of the major powers are addicted, for lack of a better phrase, to American involvement, and so everyone is going to have a significant downgrade in their capacity. The countries that are likely to rise up in the future, the one that I'm most concerned about in terms of maybe clashing with American interests is Japan. But if there's any country in the world that has a full understanding of what it means to clash with the Americans, it's Japan. So there's plenty of room there for things to go right rather than wrong. The other countries that are likely to rise up and become regional hegemons include France and Turkey, but honestly, there's not a lot of interest that we're going to have clashes. And the strategic space that something like this provides for a country like India is immense. It's just a question of what India decides to do with it.
You didn't mention Russia at all.
I did not. Russia's demographics are among the world's worst. And if you throw in things like heroin addiction and HIV and alcoholism, Russia is looking at complete cultural collapse over the.
Yo, Pete, man, I wanted to stand here and give you a shout out right here. Dude, this is the shit that I wanted you to hear. You know what I mean? I hope you watch this video. Most motherfuckers don't, you know what I mean, end of the day. But I'm going to send this to you so you understand exactly what the hell I'm talking about. You know what I mean? This is important to understand as a whole.
Course of the next generation. That doesn't mean it won't go out swinging. And if I bordered Russia, I would be very, very worried. But Russia is not long for this world.
Okay. You said something, today and in our earlier discussion that India will probably be in a very strong position to, safeguard the Middle East and the oil supplies to the Eastern Hemisphere. And, being from where we are, it looks good for us. But what about the Pakistan and the so-called CEPC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor? I mean, isn't that a land route which will be used by China?
First things first, I wouldn't use the word safeguard for the Middle East. That is definitely a business you do not want to get into. That is no fun at all. I would use the word arbitrate. You decide what goes and what doesn't, because you control the sea lanes. As for the Chinese-Pakistani axis, I fully realize why that's an obsession in India, but let me kind of underline something here. If we ever get to the point where the Chinese are capable of projecting power through that corridor into Pakistan, two things go wrong for the Chinese very, very quickly. Number one, they are treated to the same tender mercies that the Americans were when we tried to transit Pakistan. That's no fun. And number two, let's assume for the moment that the Pakistanis and the Chinese can sing kumbaya and all get along and they can pacify the Northwest Territories and all that good stuff. You do a half a dozen bombing runs into that gorge and that entire transport network collapses in an hour. So you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of Chinese investment to stabilize it. You cause a few landslides and it's done. That is not a stable transit system.
Okay.
It's another one a lot of people don't understand, right? Like real shit. Like rebuilding that Silk Road is dumb. All right. It's just extremely vulnerable in the end of the day.
Now, we've spoken about the Quad mechanism, US, Japan, Australia, India alliance. It's not really an alliance yet, but will it become a nation, NATO? 3 out of these 4 players are highly developed, rich nations. India stands out in contrast. Will such an alliance of disparates work beyond the common interest of just checking a surging China?
I don't think it'll ever be a military alliance in the traditional sense because that requires a military player that is willing to act as coordinator, and the Americans are not really interested in that role. The American goal with the Quad is to get the other 3 countries collaborating where is feasible. I think that's going to make it more of a political alliance than a military one. Because of the 3 countries, Japan's the only one with an expeditionary military. The Australians definitely punch above their weight, but this is a country of 30 million people. They can only do so much. India is the country that has the most strategic flexibility and has the best strategic position. You don't need a blue water navy in order to secure everything that you need for your future. And because those 3 countries have such wildly different defense capabilities and needs, talking with one another is great, and that's probably all you need. But the idea that one of you can come to the military aid of the other 2, I think is a reach. That doesn't make this pointless, but it does definitely limit how far it can go.
Okay. So I want to just read out of Peter's resume, his biodata, which I didn't start off with. A little bit of it, because my question will start from there. Peter is a critically acclaimed author of The Accidental Superpower and The Absent Superpower, and his third and latest title is Disunited Nations, The Scramble for Power in an Ungoverned World, which became available in March 2020. And what actually interested me and drew me to...
And let me be honest here with you, all right? I got the audiobook versions of all three of those. The first two are really amazing as far as having an understanding of what and where we come from and what's going on, right? The third one is a geopolitical strategy book that if you're interested in geography and you're interested in politics and if you're interested in how the world works, it's a great book to read because it's literally just a breakdown of individual countries that matter and what goes on inside of them and around their borders, because it's an amazing read. Like, if you have a chance, I highly recommend it. So let's keep rocking.
Talk to him, to invite him to this conclave, was this one para. With a keen eye towards what will drive tomorrow's headlines, his irreverent approach transforms topics that are normally dense and heavy into accessible, relevant takeaways for audiences of all types. With a keen eye toward what will drive tomorrow's headlines, his irreverent approach transforms topics that are normally dense and heavy into accessible, relevant takeaways for audiences of all types. This, to me, sounded very similar to what we at Times Network stand for. Irreverent, trying to look at tomorrow's headlines, basically. And that's the reason, and I also follow him, his blogs, very interesting, very contrarian. But one thing really stood out, and that is really the reason, in fact, I told him, the reason that I wanted him to come to talk here was that such a person does not really talk about India at all till recently. In fact, I really searched for something for him on India, and I found something which was a little, not very complimentary to us. And therefore, I gave him a little time to apply his theories and his numbers and his analysis and his intelligence to, study India so that we get the benefit of his, his analysis and make a little more sense of what we need to do. And I hope that this also will, interest him in doing some more work on India even after India Economic Conclave. So let me go with the question. Our conclave theme is, this is India's decade, 2021 to 2030. We want to know your remarks on how you see India performing in the decade ahead on the global stage, your view. Can you, from your vantage points, see and tell us 3 advantages that India can leverage this decade?
Let me start by saying that it's not India's decade. It's a lot more than a decade. And it's not a global stage. The global stage will be gone. So the idea of becoming a major global power is kind of irrelevant. India needs to focus on its region, because I believe one of the previous speakers mentioned that 70% of global trade crosses through the Indian Ocean Basin. It only crosses through the Indian Ocean Basin if India allows it to. So you remove the Americans from the equation. Instead of having a single global stage, you have a lot of regional stages with limited interaction. India faces no major security threats. In fact, it has the capacity of choosing who to elevate and who to crush. Anyone who wants to get through, anyone who wants to get Persian Gulf crude, anyone who wants to be involved in European, East Asian trade, India is the only country that can allow that to happen. And to think that India can't take advantage of that is silly. So strategic positioning, honestly, it doesn't get much better than where you are. The second big advantage, most of the world is facing complete demographic collapse. India is one of only 6 countries with any level of development that is not. There are challenges within that, but not having to completely rewire the way your society and economy works because of the changes in the global system, changes that you can't affect, that's wonderful. And there's only, you can count it on one hand of the number of countries that are in that situation, and none of them are nearly as powerful as India is. And then third, you are one of about a dozen countries in the world that will not be facing an energy crisis. because anyone who wants to get crude out of the Persian Gulf has to go through you. And it will be very easy for you to either get your own energy or to basically charge protection money for anyone who decides that they want to still use Persian Gulf crude. You're looking at maybe 20 countries in the world with a reasonably positive demography, and only 12 that can keep the lights on without help. And you're in both categories. I mean, honestly, you can't generate these sort of advantages with policy. This is just kind of luck of where you physically happen to be.
Thanks. That's nice to hear. Now, India was never deeply integrated into the global economy till a few years ago. And you pointed out as a short-term opportunity in a regionalizing world. How can, however, such a disengaged player emerge to be successful within the global economy in the long term? And that too,
there's not going to be a global economy, so I wouldn't aim for that. It's like, India is a major economy in and of itself. Most of the resources that it needs are either from the subcontinent itself or from Southeast Asia and Australia. Those connections are fine. The point here is that the rest of the world, everyone that India has always compared itself to, they're the ones that are facing the challenge because they're the ones who are having the rug pulled out from under them. That doesn't affect India. So in relative terms, they fall, India rises. And in absolute terms, India can continue growing. The biggest challenge that India is going to have for the next decade is getting used to a capital structure that is much more similar to the situation you had in the 1970s and the 1980s than what we've had in the 2010s. India knows how to operate with that. It won't be fun. Having half the capital at 4 times the cost is going to hurt. But you're still going to have a better capital structure than the countries that are dependent upon importing it from the wider world, while also dealing with mass demographic collapse.
Okay. Now, the world's leading market, US, is going to depend more on NAFTA. Your blogs say
Yes.
that you're going to be much more integrated with Mexico over the next few decades. And the world itself is moving to low labor-intensive manufacturing. And we, however, are a nation of, at best, semi-skilled at a larger population level. So over the short and medium term, with a financial crunch that you're talking about, how's the next 4 or 5 years, or 10 years maybe, going to be for India? Is it going to be any better than now?
Let me adjust the strategic side of the question there before getting to India. Is NAFTA moving into a less labor-intensive system? Yes. But remember, as we break apart the world and the globalized system fails, what makes sense in one region will not necessarily make sense in another. So you can have North America going into a system that uses 3D printing and just-in-time manufacturing and shorter supply chains, while what's going on in Europe goes a completely different direction. We're going to be seeing that sort of breakdown and as security barriers rise between the various regions. So for India, you don't necessarily have to go that way to supply your own needs. Especially if you do a little bit of integration with, say, Southeast Asia. Second, India is not a normal country. It's not a traditional nation state in the Westphalian sense. It's more like a loose association of different cultural regions, more like the Holy Roman Empire, if you will, which means that within India, there is substantial opportunity for parts of India that are at different stages of development to develop a kind of mini globalized system of manufacturing, with one part doing the higher end, one part doing the lower end, lots of integration, kind of like what the Americans do with Mexico. It's a model that works with the system you have, where you already have high-skilled and low-skilled manufacturing in the same country. Remember, this is a country of 1.5 billion people. There's a lot of variety, not just culturally, but economically. The biggest challenge India will face into taking advantage of that and operationalizing it as a manufacturing model is infrastructure. Again, it's a problem India knows, but if you can link those regions together with better road and rail, you can solve a lot of the problems that you're identifying here right at home.
Okay, thanks. I have 2 more questions. Before, if there is any questions that I can take from the crowd here, Meher. One is probably a simple one, but you said that the boomers population is going to suddenly go off in 2022, which means global, capital markets are going to suddenly flip over in 2022. Now, and last year, we've also had a huge bull run. Indian stock markets have outperformed in the last 1 year since the strictest lockdown. It's mainly due to the liquidity glut. How long will this party last? And I know your answer, but what would you advise Indian investors in that context? And what else are the investment avenues for people today? Because, people are having a party here right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, let me start by saying I am not a financial analyst, so take this for what it is. But yes, I expect that a lot of the positions that the baby boomers in the developed world have, a lot of the baby boomer positions in the developed world are going to be liquidated, especially those that are in the developing world, and India is no exception there. So you should expect a significant pullback of foreign investment of all types from India over the course of the next year to 2 years. That is kind of baked into the situation right now. That will not be fun. But for domestic investors, so long as capital flows are unimpeded, and I think once we have a big pullback, capital controls are going to go up in large portions of the world, India included. But as long as those are not there, investing in the American market, if you're just looking for returns, is kind of a go-to. It's generally considered the lowest risk. And so we're already seeing money pour into the United States, despite the fact that we're engaging in deficit spending that is just atrocious in historical terms. But moving forward, as the foreign money dries up, the Indian economy, the Indian municipalities are going to have no choice but to issue their own debt in order to compensate for the lack of investment that comes in. So there'll be ample opportunities to invest in local infrastructure. And honestly, if you're the Indian federal government, that's exactly where you need it to go. That is, in my opinion, the single biggest challenge facing the Indian system. Because as the global system cracks apart, India is going to be more dependent on what it can do at home. And anything that improves connectivity throughout the subcontinent is something that is going to serve India for decades.
So that would mean real estate?
I'm sorry?
Would that mean real estate? I'm talking of as an investment avenue for Indians.
I think I'm getting out of my depth here when it comes to real estate in India. Sorry.
So I have one last.
Well, let me say this. I think it's important for all of us to go sometimes. We're getting out of our depth and we really don't know what we're talking about. So with that being said, I'm going to stop this because my shit's melting down again. It's because of these fucking ads and I paused the goddamn thing. And once you come back to it, it ends up, dropping down to 0 FPS. My shit's melting down. So, we're going to make this a part 3 and finish this up. And then, I got to go do my Easter thing. So I'm going to holla at y'all. Peace.